Dungeons & Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game that involves a dungeon master and multiple players. The dungeon master crafts intricate challenges and narratives, much like an instructor creates complex problems for their students. Players guide the story with their actions, much like learners might prompt a flexible instructor to adapt and follow their lead. The essence of the game is collaboration and problem-solving, with players working together to weave their story. It is a game that embraces preparation, improvisation, success, and failure. D&D is, at its core, a nurturing educational environment where there is no right or wrong, and success is how you define it. In D&D, there is typically a Session 0, where people generate their characters and share their backstories. This is where the initial connective tissue for a campaign starts. The Dungeon Master then uses the character abilities and backstories to create a series of hooks for the campaign, giving players increased agency in the game. As presenters, our equivalent to a Session 0 was to get together on a Teams video call and to discuss our various perspectives. Our connective tissue is SUNY Potsdam, and especially the Educational Technology Graduate Program, and of course our love for D&D. And while each of us is passionate about D&D to be sure, we each come at it from different angles. In D&D, as in life, diverse groups tend to be high-performing groups, and we are excited to share our unique perspectives with you.
When I was 12 years old, I found a worn copy of Marion Zimmer Bradley's The Mists of Avalon in my grandpa's basement. This book, which tells the Arthurian legends from the perspectives of the female characters, changed my life. I specialized in medieval literature for both my bachelor's and master's degrees, and married the love of my life at the Renaissance Fair, complete with a court jester, duel with the Black Knight, and a myriad of kisses bestowed upon my husband by the Wenches Guild. This also led to another great passion, Dungeons & Dragons. I DM'd a campaign that I created based upon the Arthurian tales and never looked back. When I decided to become a teacher, I knew I had to incorporate D&D elements into my curriculum, and the results have been amazing. There are a lot of benefits to using Dungeons & Dragons in the classroom, but let's face it, not everyone has the time or space in their curriculum to run a full-blown module. Instead, teachers can infuse their lessons and activities with D&D elements, such as character development in English class using character sheets, dice probability and mapping for math, experiments that mimic D&D actions like potion making and alchemical reactions for science, character and world design for art, strength, constitution, and dexterity checks in gym, cultural studies and geography for social studies, and logic, algorithms, and game creation for computer science. The possibilities are endless. I incorporate a lot of Dungeons & Dragons elements in my high school English classes. Students begin the year with introspective analysis and explore their morals, strengths, weaknesses, inspiration, allies, challenges, and more by creating personal narrative character sheets for themselves. My 10th graders focus on the hero's journey, and we create character sheets for Beowulf and Grendel, break down their fight, and discuss how their stats and character traits shape their encounter. Students then go on to complete a virtual escape room featuring D&D elements with a focus on collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. They then exercise their creativity by designing their own characters, complete with backstories, allies, and foes, and create a world with their group to place them in, culminating in the creation of a hero's journey story. The social and technological skills they acquire and practice through the use of Dungeons & Dragons-based learning are invaluable.
Hello, my name is Alex, and I will be your Dungeon Master for this session. You have been called upon by an evil entity, your employer, to make a road trip from Dallas, Texas to a convention in New York City. Armed only with an SUV, a business credit card, and yes, you'll need to save receipts and submit an expense report, and armed with your wits and cunning, you must make it through the convention without inadvertently posting any embarrassing pictures or comments on social media. While players are the lead actors in the collaborative story realized in a D&D session, the Dungeon Master has a completely different role. We're middle management, but the good kind. We lay out the parameters of session encounters, suggest potential goals, and answer player questions about the campaign world. While the players may offer suggestions, ultimately it's up to the DM to decide where the story will start and eventually end. That said, even if a DM uses a published campaign book, the DM has no idea how the journey will turn out. But the DM will plan a general path to the end. For any given day of the road trip, the DM may plan, is there traffic? Players, there's construction up ahead for 20 miles. What do you want to do? Or maybe there's a scenic route. Players, If you take the state road, you'll drive along Beaver Lake. Supposedly it has a castle. Are you interested? Structurally, the DM creates and manages the places, things, and people that the players interact with. The DM sets out the big plot points and listens to the players and uses that information to plan the next session. In a game session, the DM is juggling multiple tasks in real time, keeping things moving forward, keeping players focused, and steering them away from getting sidetracked. Shining the spotlight on each player so they have multiple opportunities during a session to take center stage and not be left out. Conflict resolution. Sarah wants to stop for fried chicken in Tennessee and Tony must have pizza. Sometimes an impromptu battle is the best solution. Players, a busload of burly-looking nuns pulls you over. You cut them off in traffic 2 miles back and they want revenge. What do? Answering questions. Whether rules questions or questions about the game world, the DM fills in the blanks. Technology. I run game sessions online. This means screen sharing, digital maps, encounter builders for battles, and using OneNote for session notes. No doubt, preparing for and running each session of D&D takes a lot of effort, but I get to be a world builder, storyteller, meeting facilitator, referee, and actor. With my players, we get to escape from the challenges of work and life, laugh and be heroic, and be the best versions of ourselves. As a DM, every skill and talent you have can and must be utilized to deliver an engaging experience. Preparing for and running a game develops those skills like lifting weights develops your muscles. Sometimes the burn is exhausting, but the effort is always worth it. Players, you make your way across the U.S. and finally make it to New York City. But as you approach the conference center, you see an army of protesters barring the entrance. With a cacophony of chants, protesters hold up signs saying, "Taylor Swift for president." What do?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Koumourdas. I'm coming at you from the perspective of a relatively new player. I started playing Dungeons & Dragons in 2020 during lockdown. I thought it was a really good time to escape into some fantasy. I am the mother of 2 daughters, or future players or future DMs. I've worked in the product development division of educational publishing for a little over 13 years, and I'm currently pursuing my master's degree in management. So I'm going to just speak to you a bit about that new perspective and how it helped me and my career. So speaking from the new player perspective, when I first started playing the game, I was filled with this sense of insecurity and a little bit of confusion, especially because I was playing with people who had been playing for a decade or more together. But as I started creating my character, rolling for the different skills, it kind of helped me let go of some of that control or that nervousness, because everything was controlled by the dice. When we started working together and going on adventures, I found myself problem solving, building my confidence, negotiating, and encountering all different perspectives along the way. Through that, I really gained confidence in my own personal abilities and decision making behind my Dragonborn character. And I was able to take risks without the fear of real world consequences. Over time, as encounters in the game became more difficult and challenging and more exciting, I found myself thinking quickly on my feet, working with other team members and being really creative about solutions together and problem solving together through a collaborative environment. And then came some disagreements. Not every player agreed on the path we should take. I am someone who tends to be really nervous about disagreements and arguments. But in this environment, I was able to work through conflict together and navigate those disagreements in a safe space of the game. And that helped me conquer my fear of conflict and really move forward with that skill in my life. In the 3 years since I started playing D&D every single week, I've noticed some skills that have really impacted me in the real world and in my career and educational development. I had taken previously 10 years of corporate sponsored trainings, trying to really reach that next level of my career and that next level of confidence. D&D accelerated my career growth. And within a year of playing, I actually went from that entry-level position that I was stuck in for 10 years to a product and acquisitions manager within my company. I also started speaking more widely at different events, and I really credit that to all of the skills developed as a new player with Dungeons and Dragons?
Hey, my name is Jason Koumourdas, and I'm a professional in the educational publishing field. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since about 2001 with the same group of friends, and I've been their forever DM since 2015. Today, I'm going to talk to you about learning design and its place at the D&D table. Now, the thing about D&D sessions is that you can think of them as small-scale focus groups. You can kind of work around the encounters and the situations to see which aspects resonate with your players and which don't. Now, the time between sessions, you could actually pivot and either retool the encounters that didn't quite work to see if they work better, or to just eliminate them completely and focus on the things that really did work for them. If certain encounters, activities, or interactions aren't landing, you can either, like I said, focus on changing the next session, but it also gives you the ability to change even what's coming up in the next 5 minutes, just being able to have that change agility to facilitate their journey. Now, what this all really does help to do is build the adventure and the story around your players instead of focusing on the narrative as a whole. Now, one of the biggest responsibilities of a dungeon master is to be the table's guide through this fantasy world that you've built. And how do you get these players invested in this fantasy world to make them feel as if they're actually a part of it? Bite-sized pieces at a time or throughout the session allow for players to absorb and catalog the information better than just massive lore dumps or just telling them what they're experiencing. Allowing them time to interact with one aspect, whether it's a specific faction or a mechanic, will let the players recall it easier in the future. Rushing through story beats may make the players think that something is not important, so slowing down and allowing them time to interact and process will be more satisfying for you and the players. And I get it, you're excited about the things you've prepared, but you've had so much more time to sit with it and process it. Your players are getting a couple of hours to witness something that you may have spent a week perfecting and thinking about. So even though it makes sense to you, you might need to present it to them in these small bite-sized pieces so that it makes sense to them as well. Unless you're in a rare situation where you're DMing for a table of extremely experienced players, more than likely you're going to have a mix of new players and experienced veterans at the table with you. Now, a very important part of building these encounters then is to make sure that new players have the opportunities to make mistakes without getting the entire party wiped out, while also presenting a challenge for the experienced players so that they have something new to do and stay interested. So one way you can do this is by developing the encounters so that all the players need to work together, whether you need a fighter to do the lifting and somebody to do the thinking. You need to think through every single person has a role in getting through this puzzle or encounter. And also, in this way, you have players teaching players, and it becomes a much more memorable moment for them when they succeed or fail together.
Hello everyone, my name is Arpit Bawa, and I'm here today to talk about my experience with tabletop role-playing games like D&D in education research. Let me start with my backstory. I've been playing D&D for many years, where I've joined games as a player and as the dungeon master. In between my play sessions, I found the time to work on my career as an educator, and eventually found myself attending graduate school for my PhD. There, I was introduced to the world of research and literature, and it didn't take long for me to combine these two aspects of my life together and begin my research into game-based learning, which is all about utilizing games in education. In game-based learning, I would be specifically interested in looking at tabletop role-playing games. As I explored the literature, I found that one of the focuses for research regarding tabletop games in education was centered around implementation. Studies were intent on finding out how to use game systems like D&D in a course and what benefits they provide to the students. Many of the studies involved making use of tabletop systems, some taken directly from games like D&D, but some were made custom, designed to meet the specific needs of the study and the course. The results were varied, but a common benefit seen was a significant increase in student motivation and retention in classes that made use of these tabletop games. Eventually, I became curious about what I could add to this growing body of literature, so I drew on my own experience and made two key discoveries. First, having a background in both business and technology, I realized that I could make use of these games in both subject matters, showcasing that games like D&D have the potential to be multidisciplinary. Second, I noticed similarities between my approach to teaching with that of my approach to dungeon mastering. The next step was to start my own research, so I began examining the connection between teaching and dungeon mastering. After some time gathering data through interviews with instructors and dungeon masters, and then analyzing the data, I found correlations between these two roles, specifically regarding how they prepare for each session, such as having an appropriate understanding of the subject matter, and the communication and facilitation skills they need to be successful, such as being able to clearly explain important points and provide guidance to others, be they students or players. This discovery has been very exciting for me as it shows that it is possible for instructors and dungeon masters to draw on each other's experience, which has the potential to reduce resistance to implementation. Also, I can now use this as an excuse to encourage, by that I mean nag, all my fellow education colleagues to try using games like D&D in their own instruction.
Hello, I'm Steve Canning and I am the forever player. At least that's what I like to say. DMing requires doing a lot of homework and for now I prefer to spend my free time reading and playing video games. I'll probably end up DMing someday though. I'm an instructional designer and an adjunct at SUNY Potsdam where I create online courses and teach about the process for creating them. Tony and Alex pulled me into the world of D&D in 2018 or so, and I discovered I enjoy collaboratively world building and character creation, which makes sense because one of my favorite things to do is read fantasy and sci-fi. However, this wasn't always the case. I was behind on my reading as a kid. But once I discovered books like this, I quickly caught up and now all I do is read and write all day. Books are uniquely portable magic, said Stephen King. This rang true for me. You could say these sort of books were magical portals. They offered a fun escape but also teleported me to literacy and eventually employment. Escaping into a fantasy world develops visual literacy skills, that theater of the mind ability. It gives structure to what can be a wild imagination. Speaking of giving structure, that's a big part of what I do for work. As an instructional designer, I'm the spider weaving webs and making connections in the background. Each day, I unpack tons of information and repack it into web-friendly formats. There's layers upon layers of moving parts that need to come together for both instructors and learners. While building my webs, I need to collaborate closely with subject matter experts, which takes a lot of empathy and patience. Like we all do with D&D in our own ways, I've got notebooks, OneNotes, folders and bookmarks to organize my brain around my characters and around the courses I create. D&D brings creative writing to life through roleplay. People spend hours on their characters and worlds, then come together to share in an adventurous story which puts our communication skills to the test. I actually use role-playing scenarios in my online classes where I have students replying to fictional emails based on real-life events. Some folks are hesitant at first, but once they get into it, meaningful discussion occurs. All that said, I wanted to test this out with a younger group, so I recruited my awesome wife who teaches 4th grade to run a little D&D themed writing activity where they are presented with a scenario, do some brainstorming, and then write complete paragraphs. I encourage you to explore the next few slides on your own where I show the prompt, some examples of what I gave the students, and some examples of the work. Mrs. Canning informed me that her students are now expecting me to write what happens next, so I think I've got myself a bunch of new pen pals.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Ed Schneider. I'm an associate professor in the Park School of Communication at Ithaca College. I'm a very different type of Dungeons & Dragons player than most of the other people in our presentation, in that I played the game when I was about 11, and then at around 45, I found out the game had returned, which was shocking to me. I kind of thought that this was like the pet rock or something that would go away. I loved playing the game as a kid, but video games kind of replaced, in my mind at the time, what D&D was about, and so it was interesting to me to see it come back again. I'm not a serious player. I just don't have the ability to get into character like a lot of the serious players do. So I generally play Dungeons and Dragons with my children in kind of a silly, comedic way, I guess. But the other thing that is directly linked to the fact that I'm not that serious of a Dungeons and Dragons player is I tend to rely heavily on visuals. And that's kind of what I thought I would bring to this presentation, is people who aren't necessarily the most serious Dungeons and Dragons players. This is from Hasbro, explaining that only 12% of Dungeons & Dragons players are under the age of 19, and that's 15 to 19. So if you really think about a school-age student, what percentage of them have actually played Dungeons & Dragons? It's probably pretty low. You can't necessarily count on everyone having experience of what this game even is. I'm really glad that it's become more inclusive, but all I'm trying to say is that you can't count on people knowing how to play the game. And so to talk about role-playing games just in general, the point here is that games like Top Secret and other Dungeons & Dragons games, you don't actually need to own the game to play them. If you have a mental understanding of the rules and a set of any dice, you can play these games. Like, people play them in prison, for example. And so how does a game that really doesn't need anything, and in many ways the most serious players would say that this is how you should play it, right? Like, you should not have any miniatures, you should not have any maps, and all of the storytelling should be in our minds. And I respect that style of play, not the kind of player I am. So when I play Dungeons & Dragons, it is in a very heavily visual environment. There is a table that has a television laid flat on the table. The maps are animated. Every monster in the game is 3D printed. And so that way, new players can understand what's happening. And that's the issue, is that once you understand Dungeons & Dragons, playing with something that doesn't have any visuals, you can do that. But for new players, that's the whole point of what I'm saying here, is that for new players, the makerspace media elements really create a wonderful way bridging to the game using scholarly materials. You can 3D print the miniatures. You can make your own miniatures. If you teach motion graphics, you can make animated maps. If you are an English teacher and you want to include something on desktop publishing, Dungeons & Dragons is a wonderful place for desktop publishing because it has numeric data, it has stats, but not stats that are intimidating. And so therefore, how do I get this table to work with this bunch of text? So there are many, many opportunities for teachers who want to engage with their students using Dungeons & Dragons. I personally think part of the success is you have to put your phone away. You know, it's a phone away game. And so if you're looking to kind of engage students, like, take the scholarly material you have and transition that into hands-on material, Dungeons & Dragons is a great platform for that kind of stuff.
As a flexible dungeon master, my preparation is a deep dive into the world and its inhabitants, ensuring that I'm ready for whatever path my players may take. It's about getting them through the basics and then gradually adding layers of complexity and nuance as they grow more confident and capable. The adventure is a dance between freedom and structure, half sandbox, half scripted. I give players the liberty to explore, yet not so much choice that they feel lost. I read the room, adjusting the game's direction to keep everyone engaged, and above all, I make sure that each player feels vital to the unfolding story. It's a balancing act that borrows a lot from classic coaching techniques, where the goal is to get the most out of your players. When tabletop gaming, being a team player is essential. If called upon, I embrace the role of a leader, ready to step into the spotlight when the moment calls for it. But it's not just about taking charge, it's about fostering collaboration. As I step into the spotlight, I'm mindful to pass it along, ensuring that everyone gets their moment to shine. To put it another way, I try to be a good teammate. This means paying close attention to the Dungeon Master and my fellow players, showing that I value their contributions and the intricate details of our shared adventure, and when mistakes happen, I welcome them. They add an unexpected twist, making our experience richer. It is not about winning, losing, or drawing, but about giving our best and collectively showing pride in the effort. My most important role, as I see it, is to be an enthusiastic ambassador for the world of gaming, in hopes that my efforts are infectious. The key to it all is engagement and motivation. When I show how much fun the game can be, that enthusiasm spreads. Whether I'm a player or the dungeon master, I make sure to give everyone their due agency, never overshadowing and always supporting their contributions. And when it comes to trying new tactics or ideas, fear has no place at the table. I leap in, knowing that even if we stumble, there's a valuable lesson in every misstep. This mindset doesn't work just in a game, it works in life. To conclude, we would like to share with you the broad categories of skills that are fostered through playing Dungeons & Dragons. On this slide, we have 6 categories of skills that are fostered by taking on the role of Dungeon Master, and on the next slide, we have 7 categories developed through playing. And while these are by no means meant to be comprehensive, they do represent a collaborative effort from a variety of perspectives, and it is at least a good place to start. You can find a full list of skills that go along with the categories in this companion spreadsheet.